So we're here to talk about SOC, Security Operations Center, but we'll start off with what is a SOC. So we're going to give you some kind of incident examples. This used to be a cinema, so this seems an easiest way to start. I can't see everybody, but is there any hands up of anybody who recognizes that as a Security Operations Center? So this is from a kind of mid-1980s a kind of classic film called War Games. So it was a security operations center, classic hacker story. Young kid trying to impress his girlfriend, hacks in to change his grades, escalates it slightly, and nearly starts World War III. So, but you know, that's a security operations center on a much larger scale. Security operations center on a smaller scale, just one guy running Jurassic Park. Again, classic example, this time of a malicious insider, chaos ensues, and obviously then nobody learns any lessons and there's 5 more films of exactly the same thing happening. So we're not going to take any of those lessons from today. So what it actually is a security operations center from a cyber perspective. So it is responsible for an organization kind of helping protect against cyber threats. And normally it has a combination of technology, services, and people to be able to provide round-the-clock monitoring. So it's providing that constant reassurance and that control center for cybersecurity operations. And why do people need kind of SOCs? What are the customer challenges out there? And why many organizations don't have their own SOC? So do people have the capability to proactively search? We always know that there's a huge issue with capacity and skills at the moment for a lot of IT teams, and they're just trying to keep still. They keep trying to keep up to date as much as they can. They don't have that chance to proactively go out there and search for those threats. Do people have full visibility of the search? One of the kind of trends that we're seeing out there in terms of the kind of expanded landscape is organizations looking at external cybersecurity. So what are those threats outside of their networks, outside of their cloud infrastructure and their devices, looking at social media, looking at third-party applications, even as far as the dark web. So do organizations have that time to look beyond even their own network that they're trying to manage? Alert fatigue is something that we all talk about and is definitely a real thing. When you're getting alerts, and we're getting more data than absolutely ever before, thousands of alerts coming in from lots and lots of devices and lots of applications across your network, can organizations find, you know, the needle in the haystack? It's very, very difficult to be able to have the time to be able to do all of that. And then that worst case scenario, what happens if we get a call, it's a data breach and security incident, something's gone wrong? That's a real challenge. We know that, you know, the alarm bells ring, but it's when it happens at 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning and you've got to call someone from the IT team and drag them out of bed and then have to deal with it then. And do you have that scale to be able to deal with it 24/7, especially if you have a distributed workforce? You might have a distributed network across not just lots of different cities and locations, but potentially across lots of different countries and time zones as well. And that's the real challenge of building a SOC on limited capacity, limited budgets, and obviously being able to kind of manage that entire scale. And then if we look at kind of market trends, what is happening out there in terms of that threat landscape? We all know everything we've talked about today is the complexity of threats is absolutely growing. It's getting more difficult out there, and we know the reality is that, you know, prevention could well fail. We can't always rely on nothing happening. We have to be able to plan for what happens in that worst case scenario. But it's when we don't even know that necessarily happens. So those techniques are becoming more like routine behavior. Bad actors are kind of getting obviously increasingly sophisticated. So if we look across all these different elements of a cyber kill chain, more and more the techniques that the bad actors are using are designed to be able to not just look like legitimate tools that any of us could be using, but they're designed to cloak and make sure that they're not discovered by traditional security technologies at all. So you don't even know necessarily it's happening, or it's taking advantage of the own tools that you have on your business, and therefore, you know, kind of creating vulnerabilities kind of absolutely off the back of that. And some of the other things that we're definitely seeing out there is that increase in fileless attacks. So increasing that, you know, all the time we talked earlier on, kind of previous speaker about kind of mobile security, getting those texts that come. People click on links, they go to a malicious website, then, you know, that malicious website may execute something using JavaScript. It might try to exploit, for example, a PowerShell. All of this is suddenly happening, that things are executing the kind of potentially malware is being exploited on that device, but nothing has been downloaded. Nothing is there to be able to scan by traditional cybersecurity technologies, so it can't defend it in the same way. Again, we're seeing a huge rise in malware that's being designed specifically for mobile, whether it's kind of tending to kind of copy what are legitimate applications that people might try to download from the kind of Play Store or the Apple Store. But people are very aware that mobile is a really important and vulnerable attack vector. AI, because obviously everybody has to have AI in their slide deck at some point or another. I think that's pretty much the rule now. We're definitely seeing it in code, as the kind of previous speaker talked about, but also in being able to craft those business email compromise emails and the ransomware. But it's definitely being able to use in terms of the language to be able to trick people. It's becoming increasingly more sophisticated. And again, from that external cybersecurity side, domains are being used in complex attacks. So again, being to try to exploit organizations beyond what they're controlling themselves, being able to exploit things like organizations not using DMARC correctly, or even just kind of pretending to have spoof domains that have an L instead of a 1. Organizations need to be able to understand where potentially it's not them getting compromised, but it's their wider customer base. If you're a bank and an organization's registered a domain and they just change one letter and it's targeting your customers, obviously that is part of your cybersecurity posture. You need to help protect your customers as well as your own network. And then just some of those kind of other trends that we're seeing. So obviously it's not just down to technology. We can see that the attackers are so far ahead in many cases, we need to try and keep up. Those bad actors, they are kind of continually evolving, and therefore we need the resources to be able to keep up with them. So if you don't have a SOC, or if you don't have the capacity or the capabilities to be able to have it, then the alternative potentially is to look at MDR. So what is MDR? So it is a service, it's managed detection and response, but it's a service on top of that technology to enable organizations to be able to kind of expand their scale and their flexibility, and most importantly, being able to respond a lot quicker than they would otherwise. The prediction from Gartner is that within only a couple of years, up to 50% of organizations will be using some MDR service of one form or another. But absolutely, it's not one of those things that organizations are looking to get rid of their IT team or their security teams and just completely outsource it. It's about supplementing what they've already got. So it's adding to existing capabilities where there's that skill gap, where's that expertise, where they want to have round-the-sun coverage, whatever it happens to be, it's being able to complement what the existing cybersecurity team is already doing. And one of the trends we're definitely seeing is actually it's becoming a little bit more of a requirement. We've seen more organizations being asked to actually demonstrate that they're looking at MDR or they're taking it on as part of things like either compliance or particular cyber insurance, for those of you who may be having cyber insurance kind of as a way of kind of complementing what you're doing from a cybersecurity posture out there. And what else are we seeing in terms of what customers are talking about? They want that cyber resilience. I think that cyber resilience is definitely a term that we're seeing a lot more because organizations accept that it's not just about just defense only. It's not just about protection. It's about what happens in the event of something going wrong. It's responding quickly. It's being able to work with what's happened. It's being able to mitigate that damage really, really quickly to make sure that in the event of a compromise, an organization doesn't become one of those statistics that goes out of business and they can respond quicker. And they can keep up with those cybersecurity threats as much as possible. And what else can kind of MDR bring them? It can bring them that assessment. It can give them an understanding of where they are in terms of their cybersecurity posture. Rather than just having a kind of once-a-year pen test, they can stay up to date in terms of where they are and assessing their own cybersecurity posture at any kind of what particular time. They can get a better understanding of where they are from vulnerability. So when those 0 days come out, whether it's Log4j or WannaCry or whatever it happens to be, they can have a more immediate response to it to get a handle on where they are and what potential vulnerabilities they have, and therefore be able to kind of fix them, patch them, update their systems, whatever it happens to be. And access those threat intelligence services in the right way possible. There's a huge amount of data. There's some great threat intel out there, but are organizations able to kind of make the most of it? If it's just data and information, they need to be able to turn it into actual intelligence that they can use to be able to ultimately make better business decisions within their organization. And just kind of doubling down on that, Forrester, obviously one of the other big analysts, mentioned that R is the most important thing. It's being able to respond. It's being able to react quickly. And that's why that kind of outsourced service is so important, because it can just add to your scale and your expertise quickly. You're not just always reliant on your own team kind of quite so much. And again, they reference that element around cyber insurance as increasingly becoming a requirement, and we may well ultimately see it in terms of, kind of compliance requirements as well, kind of a little bit further down the line. But one of the things we definitely get from customers is, MDR, that all kind of sounds great, but traditionally it's been one of those things that only kind of enterprises have potentially kind of looked at doing. It's something for a bit bigger scale. But I wouldn't say that's necessarily kind of what we're seeing. So kind of who is it for? It's definitely that skills gap. It's for where there are areas within your network or the applications, or if you've kind of got a team that is kind of more comfortable with on-premise technology and you're scaling out to the cloud, it means that you don't necessarily have to find and bring all those skills in-house. You can use a third-party provider, and they're the ones that are going to be staying up to date, so you don't kind of need to worry about that potential knowledge gap. Alert fatigue, again, we kind of mentioned it earlier in terms of being able to manage all of those alerts and being able to do something with it as constructively and as effectively as possible, so you can respond so much quicker than you ordinarily would do. Kind of compliance, that's an ever-moving thing. We're seeing more compliance frameworks coming in. Obviously, we've got NIS2 kind of coming, and there's going to be a DORA for those of you who are kind of financial institutions. We're going to see more requirements around kind of compliance coming in, and the ability for organizations to be able to respond to them quickly, tick all those boxes. Things like an MDR service and partnering is where there's going to be opportunities for organizations to be able to kind of tick those boxes a little bit easier. Cybersecurity tools complexity. It definitely varies. You see lots and lots of numbers, but typically we see, especially kind of mid to large organizations, can on average have between 50 and 70 different cybersecurity tools alone on their network. That's a lot to manage, and that's a huge amount of information that's going to be coming in that you're going to have to deal with. And they're all going to be updating. There's always a new shiny toy that cybersecurity vendors are going to be talking about. So being able to simplify that stack and being able to kind of rationalize it down and being able to get better value out of the technology that you already have, that's absolutely an important kind of driver as well. And just overall strengthening the cybersecurity posture that you've got in terms of being able to be more resilient, more responsive, and just being able to feel that you're kind of a little bit more on the front foot rather than just kind of being able to kind of be defensive and always kind of reacting to what's happening out there. But most importantly, all of that builds up to why we see MDR as being important, as it can be a long-term partnership. It's not just simply kind of outsourcing a problem. It's about having those two teams being able to work kind of really closely together to deliver value back into an organization. So obviously in terms of Bitdefender, part of the MDR service from Bitdefender is having that SOC, and this is where that kind of skills gap comes in. The advantage of being able to work with a third party around that is being able to leverage that 24/7 follow the sun support, of being able to get access to a whole bunch of really, really cool, incredibly clever, amazing people that they get in from the intelligence services that might be out of reach of a kind of an SME or a mid-market organization, but being able to leverage their skills and experience is definitely one of the benefits of looking at a kind of MDR service like this. And it covers all of those kind of elements around kind of network, cloud, all your applications, but most importantly, giving you that actionable intelligence and analytics, again, to be able to ensure that you're making kind of more informed kind of business decisions. So it's built on that intelligence. The kind of fight fire with fire is, again, enabling organizations to be a little bit more front foot there's always the kind of arms race, and obviously AI now is coming in and that's escalating that even more. It's enabling organizations to be kind of much more front foot and trying to stay ahead of those of the bad actors. And obviously that scalable experience of being able to kind of work with a service to be able to expand out what it's giving you in a much easier way than it is of being able to bring those resources and those skills into the organization itself. So, kind of in the real world, we always glamorous case study, Barnsley Council. But this is the kind of real world examples of kind of what we see. And it's kind of half of this is around cybersecurity. So obviously, there is, they had a challenge with ransomware kind of being able to break through, and they were having security incidents, but it's actually also productivity. It's really important when we talk about cybersecurity of what is the demonstrable ROI, what is the business outcome with it? Well, actually, it's being able to install technology really quickly, get it up and running, deploying across a hybrid environment, but actually reducing admin time, having the right service to be able to do reports, be able to update systems, and make sure that the IT team at the council are able to respond much quicker and have high value and deliver high value activities rather than doing admin, rather than sorting through countless different event logs from Windows Server to be able to work out, what potentially is a red flag and what is, what is a false positive. So actually making sure your teams are much more effective is a key part of that. And that's where kind of that ROI comes in. A home improvement and repair service, again, complex distributed environments needing extra kind of cybersecurity expertise. And again, working, for example, something you can get with MDR services are these playbooks. You can automate a lot of the reaction time. So you know your organization better, building out playbooks. So when something happens, that can all be automated. Service can just kick off and something can react. So you can reduce your response times dramatically rather than having to do everything manually all of the time. And there's kind of three elements to a kind of MDR service. There's 24/7 monitoring, that kind of broader coverage, and then the threat hunting and threat intelligence. And that kind of monitoring response, I talked about those playbooks of being able to respond quicker, using automation, using AI, of being able to build that in so valuable time isn't spent kind of reacting and trying to work out what the plan needs to be. It's following plans to be able to respond quicker, respond automatically, mitigate those threats as quickly as possible, close things down, protect things in the event of an incident. So again, time can be better spent resolving kind of what happened, understanding, and then being able to respond more effectively. Working out what the kind of priority targets are as well. Every organization is different. Sometimes it's going to be certain web applications. It might be high-value users. It might be where the organization has lots of PII. So understanding where the priorities are and then being able to target them specifically in terms of enhanced protection and really being able to focus on them to make sure that, the organization's crown jewels that could be targeted, by potential criminals are the ones that are going to be protected, and the right reassurances in place there as well. Those expert recommendations, all these kind of fancy people that we talked about, those fantastic security analysts, being able to get recommendations and advice from them, getting that insight and intelligence is really, really important, and being able to try and stay ahead, as much as possible in terms of being able to plan out the cybersecurity strategy and what's going to come next from either a technology or a service or an installation perspective in terms of whatever it happens to be. And actually that root cause and analysis, and often in the event of a cyber incident, those lessons learned are a fundamental part of it. It's not just what happened, it's being able to mitigate, lock down and recover and respond as quickly as possible, but also understand what happened, what went wrong, what lessons can we learn from this, and being able to have the ability to use the technology to track back, to understand what that root cause was, where the initial exploit, where was the exposure, was it someone clicking on a link, was it an unpatched server, whatever it happened to be, was it a third-party supply chain attack, which we're seeing is increasingly common. Doing that analysis is really a fundamental part of anything, of any cybersecurity strategy, and understanding kind of what happens when something went wrong. And I suppose this kind of the quote from a customer, the most important kind of element to bring out of that is, it's what happens if you get that call at 4 a.m. on a Sunday. Frankly, just getting someone else to take the call at 4 a.m. on Sunday morning is probably the best reassurance that you can possibly take. Threat intel, so, kind of cover that at a high level. It's that threat modeling, that brand and IP protection. So when I talked about external cybersecurity earlier, it's an organization's cybersecurity can't just cover its own network, its own devices. Increasingly, there is an obligation out there to protect customers. If you have something that, if you have a data leak, it gets out there, it gets exposed. Bad guys are going to immediately pick up on that, and the phishing emails are going to come out with that logo. Targeting those customers, you have an obligation to be able to go out there and help protect them. So cybersecurity beyond your own boundaries is absolutely something that's driving a lot of organizations now. And that covers that dark web monitoring as well. So again, in the event of a breach, your data may well end up on the dark web. It's not just a case of just praying and hoping it's not going to get covered, or you're not going to get a ransomware charge, or you're not going to get it, try to get a charge from a bad actor trying to sell that data back to you. But it's being able to go out there, proactively monitor, find out what's out there. And again, it's that whole being able to be on the front foot. And again, having that time to be able to go out there and do that threat hunting. What's on your network? Just don't wait for something to be out there, to be able to go out there and look at it as well at the same time. So from a key outcomes perspective, it's that executive reporting. It's that information back up to the highest level, to the board, to be able to drive things forward and really inform your cybersecurity strategy. It's having that tailored response. It's things like playbooks, being able to enhance what your offering is, kind of to the business as part of the IT team to be able to make it more effective, and having those recommendations, being able to look a little bit further forward and leveraging the intelligence, from the team out there. If any of you are interested, we do have a calculator. We'll provide some information per and we'll send it all around afterwards to be able to do some analysis and some calculations to be able to understand the value, because absolutely demonstrating ROI on the back of any cybersecurity technology is really, really important. And then finally, it's not just the good guys that have the SOCs, it's the bad guys who have the SOCs as well. And if you don't know that, that's obviously from Return of the Jedi, that's Endor, and it all worked out in the end because the good guys went in, they used various deception techniques, and they used furry Ewoks, which I appreciate not all of us are going to be able to deploy. But even the bad guys have SOCs, but they have vulnerabilities that the good guys can exploit as well. That was a quick rattle through. Thank you very much.